terrible characters destroy even the most amazing plots. But what if I told you it's possible to make your audience fall in love with anyone? The most uncomfortable truth hit me the moment I sat down to watch Netflix's You. That guy is a creepy psychopath. And I like him? No, even worse, I'm actually rooting for him. The guy is infectious from the second he utters the first word, and I'm not the only one who has been captivated. Despite the fact he gets fixated on a girl, breaks into her house, steals her phone, and stalks her throughout the course of the episode, hordes and hordes of people have donned the I Love Joe Goldberg t-shirt, and I wanted to find out why. So in this video, I'm going to reveal 3 simple tricks that anyone can use to make characters that audiences will gush over, show you how you can use them in your own writing, and the last one is so mind-blowingly impactful, it will strengthen even the worst piece of writing. But who is Joe Goldberg and what makes him so interesting? Joe Goldberg is the main character of the Netflix original series You, and while he does so many twisted things that you hate him for in real life, you can't help but fall in love with him and quickly find yourself getting invested in his motivations. The show has such an effect on its audience that you even start to understand his justifications for the choices he makes. But how do the writers even begin to connect us with such a dark character? Well, the answer to this question can be summed up by talking about job applications. When you are trying to find a job, you must enter your resume to show the management you'd like to work for what you're capable of. You don't even get to enter the office for an interview until you have grabbed the initial attention of the employers. And when you're watching a TV show or reading a book for the first time, you are like an employer making a decision on whether you'd like to give the character more time based on your first impressions. So it's important for the writers to generate intrigue as fast as possible. But how did the show You manage to do this with the psychopath? Well, for one, we didn't actually know he was a psychopath just yet. In fact, the writers made some very key decisions which contribute to why we let his wild behavior slide, but more on that later. Before we even begin to focus on how we became so hooked on Joe, we need to understand how the show got us to watch past the first few minutes. It did this with one simple technique: voiceover. But not just any voiceover. The dialogue frames him as a person who has a passion for books, and is incredibly perceptive. From hearing this, we build up a picture of what we think this guy might look like, until he is revealed on screen and turns out to be not what we were expecting. By letting us hear his thoughts first, the creators prevent us from making judgments on anything but the way that he sounds. When he turns out to look completely different to what we were expecting, we are instantly intrigued as it's quite clear there's more depth to this character than meets the eye. Not only that, we are automatically drawn to characters that we perceive to have more intelligence than us, and this instantly establishes a level of trust. This effect couldn't have been pulled off by just using the voiceover alone. If the voiceover matched reality in a perfect way, it would have felt quite repetitive and tiresome. Instead, we follow Joe's thoughts, which either juxtapose what we are seeing on screen, or have his observations confirmed, further cementing him as an intelligent person. We even get a laugh out of some of his more outlandish ideas. Being given the secrets behind what he is thinking, while showing how he interacts with the outside world, makes us want to know more about the character, and offers just enough connection to keep watching. So how can you do this in your own writing? You need to figure out what will make your character intriguing. Is there something about them that stands out against the crowd? Maybe they've got an interesting flaw or quirky personality, or maybe they're quite clearly hiding something. Make sure to lean into that in the very first scene. That way you can get people interested from the start. And remember, you don't want to tell them everything just yet. Generating some questions that the audience want answered will also make them stick around long enough to learn more. But what do you do once you've gotten past the first scene? How do you turn this initial intrigue into unrequited love? Remember when you were a school kid in the playground and you were trying to make a new friend? You no doubt found yourself drawn to people who had the same interests as you. This is because when we find someone has something in common with us, we feel like we have some sort of connection. And this connection makes us closer as we have shared a similar experience in the past, which leads to the most valuable emotion you can make your audience feel about your characters. Most writers worry about whether their characters are liked, but if you can generate this emotion, not only does it not matter whether they are liked, it single-handedly makes your audience care so much that they will be glued to their seat. But what is the emotion and how can writers generate it? You opens with a very relatable scene. Something that most of us will have experienced before. Meeting someone that we are attracted to. Putting Joe in a situation we've all been in allows us to instantly relate to him. as most of us have had the simple motive of impressing someone in the past. This way, we, as the audience, form a quick connection with Joe, and this opens the door to the emotion I spoke about earlier, empathy. While we don't necessarily agree with some of the choices he makes throughout the episode, the simple fact that we understand the motives behind them softens us to him as a protagonist. So if you want to create characters that your audience roots for instantly, then make their motivations something that everyone can relate to. But what about some of the more outlandish things he does? Empathy doesn't really cover those. How do the writers manage to increase our connection to him, even in his creepiest moments? Through one simple technique, which you can see in this one scene where Joe is masturbating in the street while watching Beck through the window. This is a horribly creepy moment, which is very quickly followed by an awkward situation as an old lady walks out the door behind him, completely oblivious, and the audience can do nothing but laugh as the tension is released. By having your main character make the audience laugh, that releases endorphins, which are guaranteed to make us feel closer to them, and as a result you can get away with characters doing more outlandish things. But this whole story could have fallen apart if the writers didn't do this one last thing to solidify our love for Joe. It's the thing that takes our audience from infatuated to the head over heels they can do no wrong kind of love. The next ingredient is the basis behind why we look past Joe's worst behavior and even find ourselves rooting for his darker motives. It all starts with a first date. Sure, you've met the person, and now you're considering taking it to the next level, but before you decide, you want to make sure that they're the one. So they put on their best clothes, give you their best smile, and try to show you all of the best things about them. You don't want to see them sitting on the toilet right now or watch them picking their nose. You won't accept that kind of behavior until you're deeply in love with them. And it's no different with characters. Audiences need to see them at their best before they see them at their worst. So we need to stack the deck in their favor. But how do the creators of You manage to do this in under 10 minutes, and how can you do it too? When we first meet Joe, he's in a fairly neutral situation. He's working in a bookstore, and he spots a girl he is attracted to. He doesn't do anything particularly good or bad during this scene, but like mentioned before, it gets us interested in him. But the scene that follows does something which sets up the foundations that will make us feel like he's a great person to root for. It comes when he is walking back to his flat and spots a young kid, Paco, sat reading on the stairs in the corridor while loud shouting goes on from within one of the doors. It becomes clear that this poor kid lives in an abusive household, but the smile he gives Joe tells us just how much he looks up to him. Not only do we feel drawn to Joe because he is helpful and lends Paco the books to read to distract him from his home life, we also get to see that another character likes him, and as a result, we decide that if somebody likes him, then we can too. So another trick you can use to get people to like your character is to simply show someone who appreciates them. But I realized something huge when watching this. Though it's something that needs to be planned out to execute well, and before I reveal how the creators of You made sure that we will be fully sold on Joe by the end of the episode, you need to understand one thing. People will decide how they feel about a character based on their actions in the first few scenes. This is why we see the scene where Joe helps the young boy before we see him do anything creepy. But that doesn't excuse how the episode ends. For us to be okay with him smashing another character's head in and locking him in a cage, the writers knew they needed to implement the stacking effect. This means that they would need to make his motives abundantly clear to us before he did anything. After we see his kindness to Paco, the writers spend the first act establishing that Joe has a thing for Beck, and he will stop at nothing to get with her. Due to his charisma in the first scene, we are rooting for Joe to make this work. The second scene softens us to Joe as a person, and the following hunt to learn more about her, while slightly strange, is almost acceptable as it helps him work towards his goal of falling in love with her. Then, just as we might start to feel a little awkward to the level of effort he puts in, the writers end the first act with the most important turning point in the story. They reveal that Beck has got a boyfriend, and not just any boyfriend. This guy is a complete sleazebag. They've purposefully made him an awful person to highlight the goodness in their protagonist. While Joe has the good nature to care for people, Benji cares only for himself. When we first see him, we find out that not only has he cheated on Beck, he's also a drug addict and uses his dialogue to emotionally manipulate her. We, as the audience, are already sold on Beck because we've been learning about her through Joe, so it makes us very upset to find that she's being treated this way. Benji becomes the clear antagonist for the episode, but the people worse than Joe keep on coming, because Paco's stepfather Ron is also physically abusive, and this pits Joe up against two people who, in comparison, make him look like an angel. This is the most powerful thing that any writer can do, and that is to stack the scenes in such a way that we understand and even believe that what Joe is doing is for the greater good of Beck. We care about Beck and Paco even more than we do Joe, and as a result, we turn to Joe to fix these issues. Joe's actions are even more justifiable when his stalking of Beck leads to him saving her life, which ultimately strengthens our belief that what he is doing is a good thing, as long as you stack the scenes in an order which allow your audience to understand the motives of the character, while using other characters to highlight the positives. You can make the audience care about anyone. But none of this is gonna work if you don't nail the plot in the first place, and there is one key mistake you could be at risk of making which will ruin the entire thing, so don't forget to check out this video where I tell you exactly how to avoid it.